Good. For anyone that doesn't know her, she is one of the sweetest souls I have met and got to know in the last 6 months or something. She's in our IF table, and I've just been so blessed to get to know her, so I'm excited for her to speak to us today.
Well, good morning. I'm glad to be at Mom to Mom today, although I'm not too sure about being up here. This is not why I started coming. But I'm going to choose to be vulnerable today and be open and share with you what God has been working on in my life in the last while, kind of along the lines of what is motivating you to love, or just what motivates you at all. On Christmas evening, about a week and a half ago, I found myself in the bathroom at my parents' place, because where else are you going to go to be alone with a house full of people, right? And I was just crying out to God and facing my motives for loving my family. For about 3 months prior to this, God had been really changing my heart and working in me in laying down my needs, my desires, my wants, things that I wanted to feel, the love I wanted to feel for my family, and helping me to be able to pour love into them and to make choices to love them unconditionally and look for ways to bless them and minister to them. And it was the first time this year that we were, or I guess last year, that my entire family was going to be together for Christmas in like 4 or 5 years. And I had been praying and hoping for this to be a time of healing some of those little wounds and injuries in the relationships of our family, and just really just hoping for it to just be a great time of family and growth and just togetherness. And that night as I sat there and I was like, God, why does this stuff hurt so much? And where am I missing this? He showed me that my motives for why I was loving my family had kind of derailed a little bit. I had this, image in my head of what I wanted to happen when we were all together, that if I laid down myself and if I loved them enough, that certain things would happen and we would have this certain kind of experience. And I had forgotten that I was loving them and wanting to love them because of his love for me, and wanting to give that to spread that out there to them. And in that moment, he brought me back to the place where I could be like, change me, God. Change my heart. Give me your eyes. Fill me so full of you that there isn't room for me. And as I left the bathroom that night and went out to finish playing the game I was playing with most of my siblings, the pressure lifted, the pain lifted, and I could just, instead of feeling that stressed out feeling and that frustration, I could just totally enjoy being with my family and having a good time. I honestly have not laughed that hard in a long time, I don't think. One of the things I think that is the hardest about keeping our motives in love or whatever, it can be fear. And for most of my life, I was driven and motivated completely by fear. I grew up in a Christian home that was part of the Mennonite culture. And I really kind of believed that unless I performed to a high enough level, no one would love me. And eventually I took that into my relationship with the Lord. I became a Christian, or asked Jesus into my heart at 9 years old, because I was scared of going to hell. And I wanted to know, what do I have to do to keep from going there? And so I don't really remember there being a change or feeling a lot of joy or anything like that when that happened. I do remember, I think the very next day, going to school and apologizing to my little schoolmates for anything that I might have done wrong to them. And it was completely driven by performance and duty and fear and all of that. And I would, as I got older, I would read my Bible looking for hoops to jump through. Like, what can I do that makes me good enough for the Lord? And I didn't really tell anybody this, but for the next 20 to 21 years, almost 21 years, I was terrified to die. I was terrified of Jesus returning. I mean, I'm talking in my 20s. If I heard a loud noise, I would start repenting because maybe Jesus was coming back. And I would wonder, like, was I really saved? Would I actually go to heaven? And I would think, did I miss a step of salvation or something? Like, why do I feel so yucky? And there would be times where I would pour out to my heart to God, like, if I missed something, will you please show me? Well, in September of 2014, he began opening my eyes and my heart up, and he showed me how much fear I had in my life. Now, I knew I was afraid of things like staying home alone all night by myself, or going outside in the dark by myself, or boogeymen or something like that. I knew I was afraid of all those things, but I did not realize how much fear was driving me. And the picture that he gave me was this big black ball with fingers out into every area of my life. It motivated how I parented my kids. It affected my relationship with my husband, just everything. And the kind of fear I'm talking about is like the fear of what people are going to think of me. And as I seen this crippling fear in my life, and I laid on my living room floor and I just repented and confessed it before God and broke it off of me and asked him to protect my children from it. I remember I turned over and looked at the ceiling and I was just like, God, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I have tried all of my life to be good enough, to try harder, to be better, to work harder. And it's never enough. And that day, for the first time, I asked him to apply the blood of Jesus to my life and to change me. Not that I would try to change, but that he would just change me, that he would just wash me in the fountain of Jesus' blood and make me good enough. And as I laid there that day, for the first time in my life, I knew that not only could I go to heaven, but that I could run into heaven with my head held high, because I still almost can't tell this without crying, but because Jesus said I could be there. Not because I had performed good enough, not because I had earned it, but because of him. Well, this began to radically change my life, and it changed my mentality, my mindset, my belief system, my motivation. I adamantly did not want to be controlled by fear anymore. Soon after this life-changing living room floor experience, God drew me to the Gospels. Like I said, I had always tended to read the Bible looking for hoops to jump through, looking for what I needed to do. And I read a verse, it's 1 John 2:6. It says, "He that saith he abideth in him ought himself also so to walk even as he walks," speaking of Jesus. And that hit me, and I was like, if I'm supposed to walk as Jesus walks, I need to know how he walked. And through that, the Lord drew my heart to the Gospels, and for the next, maybe year or two, I just really soaked in the Gospels. And if you've never done that, I absolutely encourage you to do that. I started reading it looking for Jesus. What did he say? What did he do? How did he walk? How did he act? And looking for how I could imitate his behavior. This began changing the motive for why I did what I did. And an example of that is that in the account in Luke 4, like verses 1 through 13, I don't know if you've ever read it, but about Jesus being tempted in the wilderness by Satan. And as Satan would dangle something in front of him and tempt him with something, every single time, Jesus answered him with the word of God. He would say, "It is written," or "It is said," and he would give, quote scripture to him. And to the point where eventually the devil actually used scripture and twisted it back at him to try to get him that way. And he still used the scripture to defeat the enemy, to fight those lies. And this lit a fire in me, because all of a sudden I was like, I want to know this book. I want to know everything that's in here, because Jesus showed me this is how you fight the lie. This is how you fight the devil. And it was so intriguing to me, because it was, if I understand it right, that before he went into the wilderness, he had kind of this high. He had been filled with the Holy Spirit. And isn't that so often how it happens? We have a breakthrough. We have this really neat time, and then we get hit with the devil. Going, wait a minute, did you forget about this? And picking on us. And so my motivation for reading the Bible went from, that's what you have to do because you're a good Christian, right? And so if you don't get it done, you feel bad and you feel condemned. And if you do it, well, you just did your duty. And now all of a sudden, I wanted to know it. I wanted to know it so I could fight the enemy, so I could, be like Jesus, so I could just know the truth and not believe the lies. Another thing that I think is detrimental to being able to love people properly is putting up the walls of self-protection. As I faced the truth, and I faced what was driving me, and why do I do what I do, and what does Jesus say about that, I began to bump up against questions about my culture. And my husband and I started facing the very real question of, should we leave? Should we stay? What should we do? And about a little over a year ago, we made the choice to leave the church that we had been part of since before we were married, and follow God into another church and culture. And I don't know if any of you have ever left a conservative type culture like that, but if you have, you probably know how hard it is. Facing fears that have been ingrained in you since you were little, knowing the very choices that you are making are hurting offending, disappointing some of the people you love the most, the people pleaser in me would start wondering, should we have stayed? We could have made so many people happy. I can meet God anywhere, and we could have made so many people happy. It just killed me to disappoint so many people. And I started putting up walls. As we started coming to Grace, I didn't want to talk about my church. I didn't want to talk about activities that I was doing through my church. I hated inconveniencing my family with the slightly different time schedules. We do Sunday lunch together pretty often, and they're all the way in Delta, so it was always bumping up against the time, and I was just so nervous and just didn't want to offend anybody, didn't want to hurt anybody, and just kind of like put these walls up of protection. And in September of last year, I went to boot camp. It's like a training weekend for Daughters of Sarah. And I went there knowing life wasn't perfect, but not really expecting that there was anything major God was going to be like, deal with this one. Boy, was I in for a surprise. I got there, and God started showing me how many walls I had in my life with leaving church and different things like that. And another big one was I had lost one of my best friends to cancer about 9 months before that, and grieving had made me so angry. And in that anger, I was hurting my husband and my children, and I didn't like that. I didn't want to hurt them. And so I thought that I took care of it. I thought I got over it. But that weekend, God showed me that I actually just buried it and put up this wall like I just won't feel, so that I won't hurt anybody. And I chose to let him start taking those walls down that weekend and to allow myself to feel things again. And that was a very painful process. It was very healing, but it was very painful. But I came home excited to not live with these walls up in my life anymore. And don't you know, it wasn't very long until I faced a situation where I started building these walls back up. I faced this, knew this isn't what I wanted. I knew I didn't want to do this, but I didn't know how not to. That's what I'd always done. And so I asked God, show me how to get through this situation without putting up these walls. I think it was the very next weekend that we had the IF gathering down here in Montrose, and I don't really remember what was shared specifically that Friday night. But I remember that we had communion, and I do remember that I was just really working with God on this thing. And he showed me that my desire to to change my behavior and not do this thing was based out of pride. My motivation was me and my reputation. And that night, he began changing my heart to where I could go from, change me so that I'm well-liked, to change me so that I don't hurt people like I've been hurt. I didn't want to inflict the pain that I was feeling. And so I just started asking him to change me so that I could draw people in and not push people away. And at the end of that weekend, if you were there, they gave us a domino. And they wanted us to write one thing on it that we were going to do different when we left that weekend. Well, on my domino, I wrote that I was going to stop being defensive with my family. Now, I'm not talking about arguing and stuff like that, but inside of myself, being just so on edge and so nervous and, looking for offense and being scared and all of this thing, I was going to choose to stop being defensive. And realizing that he showed me that my people-pleasing really wasn't based out of love, and that I can choose to love even if I'm not feeling loved. I can choose to love even if it doesn't feel fair, and even if they don't deserve it, or any of that stuff. I can choose to love because of his love in me. 1 John is a book in the Bible that has been absolutely rocking my world in the last few months. It's making me face things like where I'm still trying to earn my worth, who I really am in his eyes, how much he wants me to love the people around me. And there's a verse in, it's 1 John 4:11 that says, "Beloved, if God so loved us, we ought also to love one another." It's a really simple verse, but it's been impactful to me when I face some of these yucky situations and I want to be upset. That's to remember that if God loved me enough to send his son for me, that I should be able to love those around me. And it's, that I can start looking for, it's helped me be able to change to where I can look for how can I minister to this person and pour out love into their life, instead of looking for, am I really loved? can my family accept me even if the choices I make are different than what they want and go against what they believe? And looking for what I needed, it's been able for me to just accept his love, know who I am in him, and look to pour that out on the people around me. And as you love because of that, because of who he is, and because of what he's done for you, and because you know what he thinks about them, and you know what he wants for them, I think the peace is just unexplainable. What he has been able to work in my life. Frankly, I would rather be sharing this in 10 years when I've gotten really good at this, but this is where I am right in the middle of this, and I've just been amazed at the peace that he can bring in those situations. So I guess for me, the bottom line is that our motives are what makes the difference. I can do the exact same action, and depending on what is driving me and what is motivating me, it will change the outcome, both inside of myself and in the people around me. If I'm walking in fear and shame or in performance, there's really not any life there. If I am loving people so that I receive something back, it's stressful. But if I can get to the point where I love because I know who I am and because I want them to know who they are, then the stress goes away. The expectations of other people can kind of vanish. And even if the other person or the situation never changes, I have found that I can still be filled with incredible peace. That's kind of where I am, what God has been changing in my life, and what he's working on in me. I know it was probably really short because I can barely see that clock. But hopefully it's something he can work in you. And let's pray. Dear God, thank you so much for this chance to be together today. Thank you that we could all be here even with the kind of icky weather. I pray that you would protect us as we go home from here. And God, I just pray that you would just continue to work in our hearts and that you would break down the walls and cancel the fears and the things that we face. God, I pray that you fill us so full of you that there's not room for anything else, and that we would be driven by nothing except for you and your love for us, God, and be able to see with your eyes. Thank you for each of the women that are here, and I pray that you would bless them and minister to them and meet them right where they are, God, and draw them into yourself. Go with us and keep us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Anita. So, table leaders, if you guys want to start table time, that would be awesome.